In today's episode of Quantum Action, we're going to be talking about Tony Robbins and his first book, Unlimited Power. I'll be joined by my friends Ben Woodward over in Provo, Utah, TJ Hoisington in Seattle, Washington, and Chris Harper over in Toronto, Canada. And we'll be talking about how this book has influenced each one of us. This is part one of a two-part episode to the Quantum Action Podcast. If you haven't subscribed to Quantum Action Podcast, I encourage you to subscribe and comment below and share the podcast with your friends and family. We're here to help you to get to infinity and beyond. So in this episode, we delve into Tony Robbins' work, what the book talks about, and the different techniques that are explained in the book, and how each one of us have applied this in our lives. So lots of juicy content here again on the Mastermind discussion about Tony Robbins' book, Unlimited Power. So let's get straight into it, and with Ben, TJ, and Chris. Off we go. Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Quantum Action. This is the Mastermind series where we discuss interesting books that have inspired us. And I've got my super panel with me here from across the world. I'm here near Manchester in the UK. TJ is in Seattle, Washington. Ben is near Provo, Utah. And Chris is in Toronto, Canada. So yeah, if we had someone from Japan, then I think we could, someone from Kenya, maybe we covered the whole globe. But anyway, interestingly enough, Ben is from New Zealand. I'm half Italian, half English. So we do have a bit of mix of nationalities here anyway. So I want to start off today. We're going to be talking about Unlimited Power, which is the book by Tony Robbins. But before we delve into the book Unlimited Power, I'd like each of you to briefly introduce yourself for about a minute. TJ, we'll start with you. Off you go.
Okay, just really simply, I'm the author of several high performance books and so forth. Been in the business for about 23 years. Left the Tony Robbins organization. I'm sure Fabrizio will ask something about that. But I also have a podcast called Unleash Your Greatness Within. So that's a quick gist of me.
Thank you, TJ. Over to you, Ben.
Yeah, I'm the author of the book behind me there, The Empowerment Paradox, co-founder of a new startup. It's an apparel brand, and have been working on the corporate side of things as a global president and regional director of markets and what have you for, the last 20 years or so as well. So yes, that's me in a nutshell too.
Thank you, Ben. Over you to Chris. Chris, over in Toronto.
Hey guys, I'm Chris Harper, co-founder and CEO of ZipScript, a company that's revolutionizing the background check industry.
Super, thank you. And Chris, I know you've got a book in the making, so I'm sure you're working on writing your first book.
Not yet. Maybe at some point in time.
It's coming. It's coming.
Exactly.
You got to write a book.
yeah. It's a rite of passage. I'm the only one here without a book. I'm left out.
Well, you've got help here because the three of us have done books. So if you need any help, we're here. Your beta readers are here.
Right.
This is true. If I needed a sign, this was it. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and TJ has a publishing company as well. So yeah, there you go.
There we go. Amazing.
Okay, so the book is Unlimited Power by Tony Robbins. It's his first book. So first question is, how did you come across Tony Robbins and his work? And so I'll kick off. And it was back in December 1991. I was in Los Angeles. I was doing my commercial pilot training. And at the time, I was learning to fly multi-engine aircraft, which is two engines, basically. And I was struggling with the speed of everything. And because you got two engines, there's a lot more to think about. And so I was struggling a little bit. And one evening, I switched the TV on, and I ended up on a Tony Robbins infomercial. And this guy's talking, and I thought to myself, oh, usual American hype, until this gentleman called John McCormack came on to be interviewed by Tony Robbins. And I knew who John McCormack was because my father had consulted with his company. He has a chain of hairdressing salons in the Houston area, and my dad had been over to train his hairstylist. And when he got back, he told me the whole story, and it was a fascinating story. So John McCormack was talking about how he'd been through the Tony Robbins programs and that he had all his hairdressing salon managers go through all Tony Robbins stuff. And as a result of that, they were going, their sales and things were going through the roof. It's just absolutely unbelievable. So I knew, well, if this guy's endorsing Tony Robbins, this guy's not hype. This guy's real. So the next morning I went out and I bought Unlimited Power, and Awaken the Giant Within had just come out as well. And I bought that and I started reading Unlimited Power, and I came across neuroassociative conditioning. And by applying that, my performance in flight training literally changed from night and day in 5 minutes by using neuroassociative. And my instructor was quite shocked. He said, how did you do that? And what I've been doing is I've been focusing on the instruments and things like that. And then what Tony Robbins was teaching was you need to focus on the physiology. So I said to my instructor, can you show me how to shoot this approach? So I was concentrating on his physiology, his posture, his breathing. And then all I did was copy what he did. And the approach came out perfect. And so Steve, my instructor, said, oh, that was really good. I said, Steve, let me just try another one because I want to make sure that this wasn't just luck. So I did another couple of approaches and spot on. And that solved my problem. And then I use that framework in everything else that I've been doing, look for someone that can do it well and copy their posture, as well as, learning the knowledge behind it. And that you don't just need to copy the posture. There's other stuff that you need to do. I had all the other stuff. I just was lacking confidence. And that probably was part of my, my posture wasn't right and everything. And so by putting my posture right, my confidence kicked in. And because I knew what to do, it's just, so when you know what to do, but you just don't do it, and there's something stopping you. Well, there was something stopping me, and I had the breakthrough by using neuro-associative conditioning. So that's kind of my story with unlimited power. TJ, over to you.
I think I saw commercials as a teenager. I came, my first teacher was Jim Rohn when I stumbled across a tape of his, and then I would learn somewhere that Tony Robbins started off working with Jim Rohn. And I started watching those infomercials. And at the time, you remember you had Stephen Covey out there really strong. You had Brian Tracy. You had a number of other people.
Yeah.
And I just thought, there's something about Tony Robbins. I love his energy, and I have energy. So I associated with that. And I went out immediately, bought my copy of Unlimited Power, started digging through it, and eventually worked with him. So that was kind of how I came about.
Yeah, and we'll go into.
But let me just say this.
Yeah,
it all came about with what you said, Fabrizio, modeling. The one thing I remember Tony Robbins saying, and I agreed with it.
Yeah.
Early on was, if you want to be the best, you have to model the best, or you have to model someone that's one of the best, right?
Yeah.
And then you can shave the trial and error off, right? You can just get to the result. And I thought, hey, if I can work with Tony Robbins and I know I'm going to be in the same industry, wow, I could get light years ahead faster having been associated with him. So that's kind of how my trajectory kind of began.
Super. Thank you, TJ. Ben, over to you.
Yeah, it's funny. We're all kind of going back to these infomercials from when we were
teenagers. Well, infomercials work.
They clearly have an important place, don't they? Because, so I was a teenager in New Zealand. I'd seen the infomercials, and I have to confess, at first, I hadn't paid a lot of attention at first because he does come across with a lot of energy, and at first, I think it seemed very, I need to say this carefully, very American.
Yeah, a bit hypey. Yeah, hypey American. That's the impression I got. Yeah.
Overt enthusiasm.
Let me just say, having worked with him, I would say 60% of the people that I spoke to as I traveled the country for him, as Americans, had the same feeling. So,
but it was awesome. So that was my initial opinion. What grabbed my attention was I was out one evening with some friends, and his infomercials came up in conversation with some of my friends. And one of the guys that was driving, he was like, you got to be an idiot to kind of buy into all of that hype and spin. And he kind of mocked it and criticized it. Okay. And I didn't have any particular opinion one way or the other because I was a superficial observer of the infomercials. But what grabbed my attention was afterwards, one of my closest friends that was in the car joked with me that as our friend was talking about, who would buy into this? It's kind of crazy. He had sat there quiet and just not said anything. And he's like, I've actually just bought all his books and tapes. And he's like, but I didn't want to say anything. And so we were laughing about that. But the fact that he had bought it grabbed my attention. We started talking about it, and kind of fast forward a couple of years, I'd moved over to the UK, and the company that I was working for, I was marketing manager there at the time, sold his Unlimited Power series. And so I'd requested to get copies myself to learn what we were sharing and what have you. In my lunch breaks, I'd drive off, I'd find somewhere quiet, I'd put his tapes on, and I would listen to everything while I was having my lunch and make notes. And that was when I really first had an impact. And again, it was that approach that really struck me was change your posture, change your physiology, and then you change the way you think. And it was just that, and it's really such a subtle nuance, isn't it, of a shift, to just put that first, and yet it can have such a huge impact. And so yeah, I think that moving forward has impacted my ambitions, my pursuit of my dreams and aspirations, how I've connected with other people, how I've built relationships with people of influence, and how I've gotten into those inner circles, and how that's kind of changed opportunities for me in great abundance. And I think that one subtle shift has brought about significant change for me as a consequence. So yeah, the first exposure as a teenager with the infomercials, real initial exposure came to how I would spend my lunch breaks as a new manager, listening to his material. And that was where it all kind of really shifted for me.
Super. Thank you, Ben. Chris, how about you?
I first actually came across Tony Robbins around, I think it was 2014. I had heard about him, didn't really look back at him. I was starting businesses at the time. And then I bought Money Master the Game. And that kind of got me off on my Tony Robbins pursuit, let's say. So no, I'm a huge fan of Tony Robbins. I think he embodies one of the most important things anyone on this planet needs or requires to be successful, which is passion. And then the other one would be belief. So, I mean, that to me, he's got all that. And if you have those two things, man, everything else will be sorted out on its way. But if you have passion and belief, you'll do very well, I believe.
Okay, so let's launch into the contents of the book. And apart from the neuroassociative conditioning, the physiology thing that we've all sort of said that has really, influenced us and allowed us to achieve success by using that tool. What's been other ideas that you've taken from the book and applied? Who wants to go first? Let's just flow.
Hey, so you're saying neuroassociative conditioning, just for the listeners to know, that is based on NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming.
Yeah.
Richard Bandler and Grindler kind of they were mathematicians, and they had some ideas about how you use your posture and so forth. And then Tony took it to the next level. And in fact, I would say, and I think most people watching this probably agree with this, Tony Robbins is the one that took it to the forefront. He's the one that exposed it to the bigger world and so forth, and then built a whole career really around that. I did take a couple notes and things.
Well, interesting you say that, TJ, because I did the practitioner's course in NLP a few years ago in London, and the guy that was training us said that Tony Robbins is the one that put NLP on the map. Before Tony Robbins, no one knew what NLP was. And then everybody's doing NLP. The problem that I found with people in this course, and I was one of the very few that didn't sign up to the master's course after the practitioner course, is that this whole thing of modeling people or mirroring and whatnot, yes, it can help in certain situations, but it also puts you into a false sense of security, and it can make you become manipulative with other people, which means you're not natural. And so you see all these people going for this master's course in NLP. And I know some people that have got the masters in NLP, and you speak to them and you can tell when they're mirroring you, or they're moving their body, they're copying your body language to try and create rapport. And it just doesn't come across natural. And I'm not a fan of NLP used in that sense. Where I find it useful,
or neuro-associated conditioning.
Same thing. But I mean, in flight training, it worked for me. I coach my son on the golf course, and I use it with him on the golf course. It works. But you have to have, a basis. You can't just think, well, I'm just going to copy that guy's physiology. I'm going to be able to do what he does. You've got to have the knowledge. If I hadn't done the ground school for the flying, and I hadn't had knowledge of aerodynamics and whatever, I would have never been able to. And then the NLP element of it is an add-on. But sometimes the way they drive NLP is almost like it's a religion, and you do the NLP course and you're going to be successful. No, that's not the case. It is a tool, and I think it works very well in situations like sports, like flying, and things like that, where, you know, it gives you that extra boost, that extra confidence that you need in order to implement what you've been learning through books and courses and whatnot. And that's my experience with the NAC.
Well, let's just maybe we should just clarify for the listeners.
Yeah.
NLP, or neural associative conditioning, is really about submodalities, which means the way you look at, the way you move your eyes, that you look at something, the way your posture is, the way your breathing is, all these, and then the things you're thinking about and focused on internally, all play a role on how you can build rapport with people, how you can get ahead with people, and so forth. They could definitely be used as a manipulative tool. I totally agree with that. So one has to have strong integrity-based values, because it can be used the wrong way, for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
And I would say salespeople that use it too much come across as mimicking. It's not natural. And so you have to, anyway, we can get into the details, but yeah. It's so much stuff.
At the end of the day, you know, I think you've got to be yourself. And so if that self isn't enough, you've got to, you know, improve yourself. And NLP is kind of superficial. It does help in certain things, but, you know, thinking that you're going to solve a childhood trauma in 5 minutes using NLP, nah, it takes a lot of work.
Well, I think everybody's different, right? Maybe it is a breakthrough for one person, where for 99 other people, it's not the breakthrough they need. So it probably can happen. I think we've seen probably videos of that, but
but I've also heard about people that have been on the videos, and then 3 months later, they've reverted back to what they were doing before.
100%.
So if it does work permanently, it's probably because that person has already started down a road of repentance or forgiveness or whatever it may be. And they're probably almost there, and they just need that last boost to get past and make that breakthrough. And that's where NLP can come in handy. At least that's my view anyway.
Hey, let me just show you before we get into some of the content. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, go.
I just pulled out of my file from many years ago when I worked with him. Here's an old, it would be 1999 little thing here with him. You have this. I used to give these away when I was traveling for him. Had all these. I love this one. And then one of the things, which is similar to what we're doing today, is he would do these.
I have those. Yeah.
Do you have these? Yeah. So these cassette tapes, which were really just like what we're doing today, which is, he was like one of the early day guys who started podcasting through a different medium. So we would get away as well. So.
Yeah, and I found those Power Talk tapes really, really useful. He was interviewing some very interesting people, and he was asking some very intelligent questions. So what else have you guys found interesting in the book Unlimited Power?
I think one of the things that I really loved was reframing the way that you approached challenges or problems.
Okay.
And instead of discussing why, you know, why does this issue exist? You know, rephrase that to how do I fix it?
Yeah.
And again, it's just it just blows my mind sometimes, the simplicity of the shift. It's not radical change. It's just, you know, just rephrasing a question, and it can just change everything, you know, by using the right language internally to get to the right solution. But you know, looking instead at how, because sometimes, regardless of whether you figure out why a problem exists, doesn't change the fact that it does. You know, you've still got to focus on how to approach it, how to respond to it, and then look at, you know, the pain points in your life. Are they opportunities or are they problems? You know, and I just love that whole approach to whatever you're dealing with in life can be an opportunity and a chance to become better and to get to where you want to be. It's not a failure. It's just part of the journey, and I really like that.
Yeah, I think he talks a lot about asking the right questions, and I think often enough we have a problem and we can't find the solution because we're not asking the right question. And so sometimes you're trying to focus on the solution, but the solution will come when you ask a different question.
Yeah.
And that I think is key.
He says in the book, based on this, Ben, I think that's a great insight, is even, sorry.
Yeah.
Even the most successful person can think of what isn't working and go into a state of depression or frustration or anger, or he can focus all the things that are working in his life. Here's the point. No matter how terrible a situation is, you can represent it in a way that empowers you. So making that mental shift to look at it differently, like Ben was talking about, is huge, transformational.
Yeah.
Chris, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back down for me. It's pretty simple. It's the belief aspect of this book where, you know, beliefs can be the most powerful forces creating good in your life. And I believe that's the foundation of everything that happens good in your life. And I know we talked about it a little bit in the last podcast, but to me, that's the most powerful thing that's rung true my whole life. You know, I always believed in myself. Now I believe in myself more than ever. And that just benefits me so much more. There's no issue I can't solve. There's no problem that is too big for me to conquer. Right. So whatever it is, I actually look at that as now a problem is a great indicator that I'm doing something bigger and better than I was doing before. And now I have the capabilities of handling it because I believe so strongly in myself. So yeah, I think for me, that's like super awesome part of the book is just, you know, you can get nuanced and all these things and go super deep on it, but I don't even think it's necessary. I think just believe in yourself, man. If you believe in yourself, you will figure it out.
Yeah. I liked at the beginning of the book when he tells the story of Steven Spielberg, where he just went on set and started hanging around and and talking to people and, you know, and picking things up and learning and that's how he became famous in the movie industry.
That's great though. That's belief, right? Most people are too scared to even go down to that place and just knock on the door and show up, right? And it's like, this guy's like, hey, I'm just going to do this. And that's literally that simple, right? And he hung around and he was persistent and consistent, but it starts with that foundation of belief. So just believe in yourself. That's what I like about it.
And to increase that belief, you got to be willing to do hard things. Meaning, you got to be willing to believe, okay, maybe this is possible, to the point that it leads you to take at least a step or two steps into the unknown, because it's through that process that I think your beliefs become stretched, because you realize, hey, maybe I am more capable than I thought I was. And then you take another step and you think, okay, maybe I'm more, but then, you know, most people talk themselves out of it before they even take the step. So the key is having that belief, and you grow that belief by taking small and big steps along the way.
To add to that, TJ, I think there was a point in the book too that talked about having a support system kind of to really motivate you. And I think that adds to that, right? I think that's critical, right? Because no matter how much you believe in yourself, there's going to be a bumpy road. There's going to be a bumpy day, a bumpy week, a bumpy month. So you need that teammate or teammates to encourage you that, hey, this is to be expected. You're amazing. This is great. You'll get through this. You are the best, you know, and if you have that, then you'll spend less time festering in the downsides and the negatives, because your support system will be like, this is expected. You're going to get through this. And then that'll motivate you out of that hole quicker.
Yeah. So, he says in the book on that, Chris, he says in the book, no matter how grim your world is, okay, so this is a little bit different, but it's the same premise.
Yeah.
No matter how grim your world is, if you can read about the accomplishment of others, you can create the beliefs that will allow you to succeed. And so that just makes me think what you're talking about, whether it's associations or the things you're filling your mind with, all that is association, and the beliefs that can come from that. Unbelievable.
Yeah, he talks about, you know, the importance of studying successful people. Make success a subject to study, and read the biographies of successful people. And then, you know, today we've got a lot more available than just books. We can listen to podcasts, we can watch YouTube videos. You know, there's and you know, and through social media, very often you can reach out to these people and manage to get on a call with them. There's lots of different conferences online and offline you can go to, and you can meet these people in person and learn from them. I mean, I had the opportunity a few years ago to meet with Bob Proctor and talk to him face to face. I met with him a couple of times, and he was a great guy, and he's influenced me, and there's a lot to learn from him. And it's great to be able to do that and to, to understand that success is there. You need to study it. Just find people that have done what you really want to do and get to know them, get to know how they did what they did. See if you can get inside their heads and see, Tony Robbins talks about the external and the internal, what's going on internally and externally. And if we can get inside the heads of these people and find out what they're thinking, and this is where the physiology, your posture, because that just helps you chemically, even inside your brain, to sort of create a type of mindset. I mean, you can't be depressed if you're sitting up like that. It's very difficult to be depressed. And so, that kind of thing is really, really useful. But for me, I mean, I enjoy reading the biographies of successful people. I enjoy having them here on the podcast. And, if anybody's accomplished something particular that's interesting, and that's interesting to have them on. I mean, I was talking to a science fiction author the other day. I did an episode with him, and he's an indie author, which means he's self-published, and he's written 15 books in this series. And the first book's got like 2,400 reviews, 4 5-star reviews on Amazon. And he's done no social media marketing. And I'm like, how did you do that? And he tells the story. And it's interesting. It's interesting because, I read this guy's first book. I thought he must be an interesting person, because look at the success this book is having. And I reached out to him, and I had the opportunity to meet with him and talk and have him on Quantum Action. So, you can learn a lot from other people. And today it's easier to connect with people than 30 years ago.
Here's the problem. Here, we talked about this on our last call, just real quick. I think Chris brought it up on our last call, is distraction, right? So we live in a world where there's so much data and voices being thrown at us through social media, TV, whatever, that we become, in a sense, addicted to screens. And I think what Tony Robbins would say if he was in this interview right here, he says, you got to pull away from the screens and actually go make the call. You have to go knock on the door. You actually have to go talk to someone. And so it's moving from education, entertainment to action. What we got to remember with all the learning that we're doing. That has to lead to you taking a step.
Yeah.
To add to that just quickly, and then we can continue to move on, Fab.
Yeah.
I actually spend like very minimal time reading, like very minimal time, or even like consuming education content anymore. The only time I do jump on that stuff is when I feel stuck. And I feel like that's an indicator for me when it's like, okay, hey, I've got shit to do. I know what I have to do. I've got to get this done, that done, this done. But then if I'm hitting a strategic roadblock, a big decision roadblock, that's when I'll pick up a book. I think, TJ, to add to your point, there's like a point where there's too much. Stop learning, start doing. The book is not just going to get you out of your house, run down the street, talk to the guy, or send the email you need to send. And I think that could be something we do as human beings that gives us like an endorphin hit. We think we're doing something, but it's like, dude, if you're not applying the knowledge you've learned in the book, pick up a summary, do something. You don't have to read the whole book even, but apply the knowledge for sure.
Where does real learning happen? It happens
exactly.
You take action, you fall down, you get back up, you learn from it. That's where the real learning is, right? So
It's interesting. That's a really good point, Chris, because I think there's a very careful balance, isn't there? I love reading, and I think it's one of the great rewards that we have in the world that we're in now, of being able to, when you look for mentors and heroes to learn from, to emulate, to strive to be like, that books can give you an abundance of opportunity to connect and be mentored by great people. But if you don't balance that, as to your point, with taking meaningful action, then nothing changes. Yeah. And I think there are so many people that will get caught up in that space of, they'll attend all the courses, the seminars, they'll read all the books, and they're in that constant pursuit of learning, putting themselves in that framework of, I'm taking action. It's like, no, you're just learning. Real action is in the practice. And I grew up as a heavily involved in music. I used to play in jazz bands and what have you. And if you ever looked at a musician that was practicing their instrument, theory played a part, an important part, but the real practice came when you take your instrument out and you would play it. that's when you got good. It was in the play, in the practice, in the using of it, that improvement would come about. And I think it's the same with any of these skills, with any desire to make a change in life and business and who you want to become. It really does come down to action. And just going back to this point about what Tony Robbins was saying before about creating that right environment. I love this quote that he had where he says that the power of positive thinking is the ability to generate a feeling of certainty in yourself when nothing in your environment supports you. And I think what's interesting there is how the word create. How do you create that environment or that sense of certainty within yourself when you're not surrounded by any sense of certainty at all? And that comes from action. I think a lot of people interpret positive thinking, creating change, in the sense of, I'm going to have a positive attitude. The positive attitude is the starting point. That's what stimulates the behavior. It's been said, what you do is the fruit of what you think, feel, and believe. And in order to have the right feelings, you've got to create the right framework and environment for those feelings to exist. And it's not just, positive mental attitude changes everything. It's action changes things, but it's the attitude that stimulates the action in the first place, but it's got to lead to action.
But one thing Tony would say, agreed 100%. And one thing Tony would say is you got to get yourself into a state of certainty to take action. Yeah. Right. And maybe for Chris, I'm just using Chris, you as an example here, maybe just throughout your life, you've always been that go-getter that just, you don't need a lot of revving up to get going. You just go and you start taking action and you get the result. And we've all had moments like that in our life. But what are the things, this is what I think would be a valuable insight. What are the two things that have to be in place to create a state of mind? And the two things that need to be in place to create a state of mind are internal representations and physiology. Meaning what we focus on, the meaning we give it, what are we filling our mind with, what are we repeating over and over and over, how are we looking at it internally, and then how are we, physiology, how are we sitting, our posture and so forth. And I would add to that is, I often ask my audiences, how many of you believe that snapping at someone is probably not a nice thing to do? I get if there's 100 people in the room, I get 100 hands that go up. But I then ask, how many of you have ever snapped to someone? And then there'll be a chuckle and all the hands will go up. Well, what happened? What was the difference? The difference was probably most of the time, when you did snap, you were in a state of stress. Your state of mind was not in an optimal place. And so what Tony was teaching in his book and is teaching is, how can I take control of my life by taking control of my state of mind? And the key is getting the focus right, the internal, he would call it internal representation, along with making sure physiology, you've eaten enough food, you've gotten enough sleep, you're sitting like a high achiever, or standing or walking like a high achiever. All that plays a role, both physically and internally.
Can I give a simple example of that in practice? Mm-hmm. So I mentioned I used to be a jazz musician in my younger days, and it was really interesting as I was learning.
So incidentally, Ben, what instrument did you play?
I used to play the trombone.
Oh, okay.
And so a brass instrument. And what's interesting about playing a brass instrument is, unlike a piano, when you play the piano, you can hit every note on the piano because the whole range of the instrument is right there before you. With a brass instrument, how long you've been playing, your embouchure, the strength of your muscles and your lips and what have you, which come through years of practice, expands and increases your range over time. So you'll start out with a very limited range as a brass player, and that will get bigger and expand over time the more you practice and perform and learn your instrument. Now in jazz music, I used to play in big bands, so swing bands and all that type of stuff. And you've got frequently in that type of genre, what they call shock notes. A shock note is maybe you've got the melody playing, and then the brass, the trumpets and trombones in the background will shout out a line, da 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 da, right? Just something like that, kind of punchy. When you're playing that, it takes confidence to hit those notes. You're doing it in concert with a bunch of other musicians, and you've got to hit it bang on time. And if you're playing the top notes, you've got to make sure you hit those top notes straight out the gate. And it takes some practice in order to do that. As I was learning, it was really interesting, because sometimes in my insecurity as a developing musician, I would hesitate, which would mean if you hesitate, you don't get those shock notes all being hit at once, and you might miss the note. You might aim for it, but you might just hit the wrong note by mistake, and it sounds dreadful. It goes from sounding really cool to really awful. Our music director used to say this as we would get that. He'd say, I want you to visualize. He'd stop the band when they'd get it wrong. He'd say, I want you to visualize. He says, at the back of the room behind me, in front, because we're facing him. He says, there is a dartboard. He says, and your goal as you're playing that shock note is to hit the bullseye. He says, you need to visualize yourself hitting that bullseye with your note, right? And so as I would do that, it blew my mind, because it would work all the time. I would then change my posture, because if I was nervous, I'm kind of leaning over my instrument a little bit. I'd change my posture. I'd sit more upright. I'd imagine myself confidently nailing that note. So I'd broaden my shoulders. My breath would be different. And of course, that's really important in hitting those notes as a brass player, because it's all in your breathing as well. My breathing would change. I'd visualize myself hitting that bullseye. And then with confidence, bam, you'd hit it. And it was remarkable, changing my posture, being more confident in my breathing techniques, and then visualizing and then hitting the note. We would always hit the note.
So
yeah, go ahead.
So Ben, when you did that, okay, so the first time you did that, you were going outside your comfort, right? It was new, right?
Yeah.
So you're probably a little bit nervous, but you made a decision. Now's the time, right?
Yeah.
Did it get easier as you played? Did the nervousness go away? Did you start to get comfortable, and it kind of became second nature to you?
It did, and this is a really good point that you raise, because it comes back to the need, in order for us to create that environment of belief, to get evidence that the beliefs are real and will produce the results, right? So the first time I did it, it was a surprise. Right? So I'm visualizing this bullseye. I'm going to hit it with my note. So I'm imagining projecting that sound to the other end of the room. That means I've got to hit it stronger, be more confident, be more assertive, sit up straighter in my chair, and do all that kind of stuff, because my hesitancy, my fear that was stopping me from hitting it, was that I wouldn't hit it. And it was remarkable how my concern that I would miss the note would ensure that I'd miss the note. But when I changed that, bam, and you hit it, it was like, at first it was surprise, filled with rapture and pleasure, like, mate, that worked, that was awesome. And then when I do it again, it would happen again, and you're like, man, that really works. And so you do it again, and you get the same result. And then what it did was the constant performance with the right result grew the confidence, where it started to become second nature, and you could do it with ease. So the big takeaway from me with that was, in order to grow my belief, I've got to do the right thing, but then I've got to look for the evidence of the results.
That's huge.
Yeah, because so often, it's belief is really centered in some type of evidence as well, isn't it? I believe the sun is going to shine this morning because I see it rise every morning. Yeah. Right? There is evidence presented to me all the time that is valuable. If I'm putting my mind in the wrong places, and this is where I think Tony Robbins' emphasis on using the right vocabulary, using the right language internally is so important. If I'm using the wrong language and looking at the wrong things, there's always going to be evidence of things that go wrong, that don't work out, and why things aren't going to be the way they should. You missed that note before, you're going to miss it again. But you're just focusing on the wrong stuff. Change your posture, change your mindset, focus on that, but then look for the evidence afterwards. I've now got the evidence that works. You do it again, you see the evidence, it reinforces it, and then it becomes second nature over time, because I'm now not just doing the right thing, I'm focusing on the evidence that comes from it. And to me, that was really important in solidifying my beliefs, that I can do it, because I would see the evidence, look for that, and then focus on that versus on all the missed notes from before.
So I hope you enjoyed part 1 of our Unlimited Power Mastermind discussion about Tony Robbins' great book here, and the input we got from Ben, TJ, and Chris. Look out for part 2. Will be coming soon. If you haven't subscribed to Quantum Action Podcast, just subscribe. You can subscribe on YouTube, Rumble, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. So make sure you subscribe on all platforms so you can listen to it when you're in the gym. You can watch it when you're sitting in bed in the evenings or on the couch at home. And also share the podcast with friends and family to get the word out there about quantum action and about taking you and everybody else to infinity and beyond. See you on the next one.